to Mark Gibson Shumaris channel. Accountant with designations CPA, MBA, CMA, ACPA, ASA, Australia. Enjoy learning!
Okay, so once again, good afternoon class and welcome to your updates on financial accounting and reporting. Today we'll discuss earnings per share. Okay, so earnings per share, this is the amount of earnings that is attributable to each ordinary shares. So take note class, this is in relation to ordinary shares. Why? Because diba, preference shares, they have fixed dividend, no? Dividends included in their uh, feature, no, as preference, no. Now, what are the types of earnings per share? So we have basic earnings per share and diluted earnings per share, no? So today we'll focus on the basic earnings per share. And then next week, we'll have diluted earnings per share. But let's define and distinguish one from the other. No? So basic earnings per share, basically this is the amount of earnings that is attributable to each ordinary shares. Now, these are applicable to outstanding shares only. No? So that's basic earnings per share. Now, for diluted earnings per share, take note that we're also taking into account potential ordinary shares. No? So like I said, today's discussion will focus on basic earnings per share. So we'll deal with diluted earnings per share next week. Now, what are um, required to be presented? No? So who are required to present earnings per share or BEPS and DEPS, no? So number one, those entities whose ordinary shares or potential ordinary shares are publicly traded. So meaning ito yung mga naka-register and trading in the stock Securities and Exchange Commission, no? So that's in the Philippines. Now, um, also, entities that are in the process of issuing ordinary shares or potential ordinary shares to the public. So ito yung entities who are about to go public, no? So ito yung nasa initial public offering. Now, uh, if the entities who are not traded, no, in the and Exchange Commission opted to also compute and present basic earnings per share, they can also do that. But they have to comply with IAS 33. No? So parang hindi naman they are not limiting to be not to present this in their financial statements, provided they also comply with the requirements of IAS 3. So basic earnings per share and diluted earnings per share, sabi natin, they should be presented with equal prominence, no? So meaning with equal importance. Saan ba dapat siya nakikita? So if or if the business is still on an ongoing operation, so meaning continuing operations or um, ingoing concern, so it should be presented at the face of the statement of comprehensive income. So basically, class, now in this slide, we're talking where should we see these BEPS and DEPS. No? BEPS, basic earnings per share, and diluted earnings per share naman pag sinabi kong DEPS. No? So if it's discontinued operations naman, we can disclose it either on the face of the statement of comprehensive income or in the notes to your financial statements. Now, in the case of consolidated financial statement and separate financial statement, the standard basically requires us to present it in the consolidated financial statement. Now, in terms of the separate financial statement, they can also present BEPS and DEPS, no? Provided they only use those information distinct, no, to the separate financial statement. So yun lang yung tatandaan natin, class. Now, let's go to the formula. No? So basically, for basic earnings per share, the aim is to provide a measure of interest of each ordinary shares in the performance of the entity. So the formula to calculate for your basic earnings per share, it's net income less the preference share dividends over the weighted average number of shares outstanding. Pero pag-usapan natin 'yon, no, yung meron ako dun asset is preference share dividends. No? So in terms of preference share dividends, if it's a cumulative preference share, we have to deduct from the net income the entitled current year dividend whether declared or not. Kasi nga, di ba, one characteristic or one feature of a cumulative preference share is they're entitled to dividend whether declared or not, and it's accumulating. No? So kung for example, this year, hindi ka nagbayad ng dividend, that will be, so meron ka ng dividend, means, sige, last year hindi ka nagbayad ng dividend. So this year, meron ka ng dividend in arrears, and if it is cumulative, so it's accumulating. Pero tandaan, class, in calculating your basic earnings per share, all you have to do is, well, all you need to use is just for 1 year. No? And so whether there are dividends in arrears, hindi natin yon kailangan. No? So we have to calculate for the preference share dividends for the current year only, whether declared or not. Now, it's different, no? If it's a non-cumulative preference share, no? Kasi pag sinabi nating non-cumulative, they're not entitled to any dividend in arrears. No? And we can only deduct from the net income the entitled current year dividend only if declared. So yun lang naman yan. No? So later on, we'll illustrate this via different discussion problems, no, para at least mas maintindihan pa natin yung buong concept. Now, weighted average number of shares outstanding. So there are different, no, there are different factors that contribute to the weighted average number of shares outstanding. So weighted by the fraction of period outstanding. So if there are issuance of shares, of course, we have to calculate it from the date of issuance. In terms of business combination naman, so acquisition date, conversion to ordinary shares, so the date of conversion, purchase of treasury shares, of course, the acquisition date, settlement of liability would be the settlement date, subscribed shares, so we have to start calculating on the subscription date. Now, changes in ordinary shares without corresponding changes in resources. No? So there are 3. Pag-usapan natin isa-isa. No? So we have share dividends. No? So imagine an entity issuing share dividends. Hindi naman talaga nadadagdagan yung resources mo. There's no increase in your assets. No? It only impacts the number of shares, of course. No, that's also true in terms of the share split. No, you're increasing the number of your shares, but there's no corresponding increase in the assets. Now, in terms of the share rights, sabi natin, di ba, pag sinabi natin share rights, this is the rights or the preemptive rights given to shareholders. No, so they can purchase. No. They are given the priority to purchase below the market price. No? So now, how are we going to apply this? No? So sabi natin, we have to apply this retrospectively. So as if the change occurred at the beginning of the earliest period, the information is presented. And then it's still applicable if such changes occur after the balance sheet date but prior to the date of the financial statements are authorized for issue. So pag-usapan natin itong number 2. Sabi natin, there are important dates, no, in the financial statements. So sabi una, of course, no, if you're in a calendar year, the balance sheet date would be December 31. Pero kailan ba yung financial statements authorized for issuance? Kailan nagkakaroon ng authority to issue the financial statements, when the uh, it's after the audited financial statements has been signed by the board of directors, no? So that's the time when you get set. So in our case, so in the Philippines, that would be before the filing of the ITR, no? So that would be before April 15. So therefore, we still have to present this, no, retrospectively. So meaning if bonus share or share dividends or share split or share rights happens in the middle of the year, so it's as if taking place at the beginning. So kaya nga retrospectively. Okay, so pag-usapan natin yan later on. So, pag share rights naman ito, class, no? So bear with me. There are a number of formula in these slides, no? But later on, we'll also apply this in a problem para at least mas ma-appreciate, no? So, in the share rights, we have this adjustment factor. Ano ba yung formula, no? To get the adjustment factor, it's fair value of share rights on over the theoretical value of X rights. Ano nga yung fair value of share rights on? It's the fair value of the shares immediately prior to the exercise of the rights. Now, how to compute for the theoretical value of X rights? It's the fair value share rights on less the theoretical value rights on. And how to compute for the theoretical value rights on? It's the fair value of the share rights on less the subscription price over the number of rights for one share plus one. So again, class, what we're going to do is we'll illustrate this later on para at least mas mag-guide tayo. Well, we have to deal with this formula. No? This is how to calculate this. No? Or what we can do to um, say instill this in your minds is by a discussion problem, and then in your case you have to try it, no, using different problems available in different review materials. That's really how to go about this type of formula. So that's on the share rights. Now, what if there's a redemption of preference shares? No? So sabi natin, if the carrying value is greater than the redemption price, then there's gain. This gain will have an impact in the calculation of your basic earnings per share. So that would be net income less preference share dividends plus gain on redemption over your weighted average number of shares outstanding. Now, if the carrying value is less than the redemption price, then there's loss in the redemption. No? So this loss will also have an impact in the determination of your basic earnings per share. So that's net income less preference share dividends less loss on redemption over weighted average number of shares outstanding. Okay, so that would be all of the concept, no, related to basic earnings per share. Again, no, for today's discussion, our focus is on the basic earnings per share. No? So late and then next week, we'll cover the diluted earnings per share. So to illustrate all of those concepts, no, let's go to the different discussion problems that I have prepared for you. So let's have discussion problem number 1. An entity had the following. So what's the requirement? What amount should be reported as basic earnings per share? An entity had the following share capital during 2021. Preference share capital for 4 million. Patandaan, it's cumulative. Kasi di ba sabi natin kanina sa formula natin, there will be different treatment, no? If it's a cumulative preference share or non-cumulative. So sabi natin, pag cumulative, we have to compute for the preference share dividend whether declared or not. Kasi nga, they are entitled to it. No? If it's non-cumulative naman, sabi natin, only when declared. No? Okay. So, also ordinary shares, 50,000 shares for 5 million. The entity reported net income of 5 million pesos for the current year. There are no preference share dividends in arrears on December 31, 2019. The entity paid no preference dividends during 2020 and paid 300,000 pesos in preference dividends during 2021. What amount should be reported as basic earnings per share for 2021? So, punta natin yung sige. Analyze muna natin. I also put here the formula no, para at least side by side kita natin uh, yung formula natin. Okay. Analyze mo natin. Siyempre, ang requirement lang naman. Ang kailangan lang natin is the net income, the preference share dividends, and also the weighted average number of shares outstanding to get your basic earnings per share. So, meron tayong net income that's provided. How much is our net income? That's 5 million. So, okay tayo dyan. Ngayon, pag-usapan natin yung preference share dividends. Sabi natin sa formula, preference share dividends, this is cumulative. Sabi natin dyan, we should deduct from the net income the entitled current year dividend whether declared or not. So meron tayo ditong cumulative preference share capital for 4 million, 10%. So 4 million multiplied by 10%, 400,000. Pag-usapan ngayon natin yung ibang detalye, no? That's also provided in the problem. Sabi dyan, there are no preference dividends in arrears on December 31, 2019. The entity paid no preference dividends during 2020 and paid 300,000 in preference dividends during 2021. So there's a partial partial payment. Pero tandaan class, these are irrelevant no in terms of the calculation of basic earnings per share kasi nga ang kailangan lang natin is the full 1 year entitlement no. So in this case, these preferential share holders are entitled to 10% cumulative preference dividends no. So that would be 4 million multiplied by 10% no. Now if there are dividends in arrears or there are unsettled dividends. No? So kung meron pa sa libro natin na dividends payable, so again, we have to ignore those information kasi ang kailangan lang natin is for 1 full year of preference share dividends. No? So that's 400,000. Now, since in this problem, there are no details provided as to the movement of your ordinary share capital. So therefore, that 50,000 shares will represent your weighted average number of shares outstanding. Kasi nga, wala namang ibang details no, as to the movement. So therefore, to compute for your basic earnings per share, so that's 5 million less 400,000 preference share dividends, so that's 4,600,000 over 50,000. So 50,000 representing the weighted average number of shares outstanding. So that's 50,000. So kunin lang natin yung solution. No? So that's 4,600,000 over 50,000 shares. So that would be 92 pesos. No? So this is the basic earnings per share for problem number 1. Punta natin yung problem number 2. In problem number 2, ang tinatanong dyan, what is the weighted average number of shares for earnings per share purposes? No? An entity had 100,000 ordinary shares issued and outstanding at the beginning of the current year. During the current year, the entity revealed the following ordinary shares transactions. So April 1, we have issued 30,000 previously unissued shares. May 1, split the share 2 for 1. And then June 30, purchased 10,000 shares for the treasury So again, no, sabi natin, di ba, treasury shares, these are shares that our own shares that we reacquire, no, for the intention of reissuing again at some future time. No? But then this will uh, decrease your outstanding shares. No? And then on July 31, ayan, distributed 20% bonus issue. And then on December 31, we have split the share 341. Tinatanong lang sa atin, what is the weighted average number of shares for APS purposes? So, napansin nyo class, in problem number 2, ang pinag-uusapan natin dito is the weighted average number. No? So basically, if we translate it to the basic earnings per share formula, this is your denominator. No? So it's important that you know how to calculate those two elements, no? So your numerator, basically your net income, yes, your preference share dividends, and then over your denominator being the weighted average number of shares outstanding. So tinatest sa atin yung denominator. No? So that's our problem number 2. So in problem number 2, aside from the basic earnings per share formula, let me also include here this, ito, this one. Para while doing problem number 2, ay makita natin ano ba yung tamang approach. Okay. So sabi natin dito, no, ang kinukuha natin is weighted average number of shares outstanding. So in January 1, meron tayong 100,000 ordinary shares outstanding. So that's 100,000. Ngayon, in April 1, nag-issue tayo. So that's additional 30,000. Yan muna ha. And then pagdating ng May 1, ito na. May 1, nagkaroon ng share split. Sabi natin, share split, we have to apply it retrospectively. So kung retrospective ang application, so it's as if it happens in January 1. So we have to multiply it by 2. So ito yan. So later, iyan lang muna natin lahat ng mga factors, and then later on, pag-usapan natin yung ibang mga details. No? Pagdating ng June 30th, we purchased 10,000 shares for the treasury. So that's deduction, no? 10,000 treasury shares. By July 31, we distributed 20% bonus issue. So again, bonus issue or share dividends, sabi dyan, we should have apply it, no? Retrospectively. We should apply it retrospectively. So therefore, it as if it happens in January 1. No? So we have to multiply it by 1.20. Pansinin nyo class, while treasury shares are not entitled to share dividends or bonus issue, tandaan that we're calculating the weighted average number of shares here. No? So therefore, we have to include treasury shares in the calculation. So that's 1.2. No? Okay na tayo dito sa July 31. Puntahan natin yung December 31. Okay na rin tayo dito sa May 1. Yung December 31, nagkaroon ng split of share, no? 341. So again, if it's a share split, no? So we have to apply it retrospectively as if it happens in January 1. No? So ito naman yun. No? So ito yung share split. Lagay ko lang dito. Share split. Oops. So ito yung share split noong May 1, bonus issue noong July 31, and then split ulit ng December 31. And of course, ito na yung ratio. So, number of months outstanding. So, April, so 9/12, and then June 30, 6/12. So, kunin lang natin, multiply natin. So, that's 100,000 multiplied by 2, multiplied by 1.20, multiplied by 3, multiplied by 12/12. So, that's 720,000. This is how to get your weighted average number na. No? So yung April 1 naman, that's 30,000 multiplied by 2, multiplied by 1.20, multiplied by 3, multiplied by 9/12. No, 9/12. Again, itong 9/12, this is the number of months outstanding. No? So we issued 30,000 starting April. So bilangan mo lang April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So that's 9 months. No? So that's 162,000. Ito, mag-iingat, no, class? This is treasury shares, so it should be a deduction. No? So that's 10,000 multiplied by 1.20 multiplied by 3 over, multiplied by 6/12. No? So that would be 18,000. Bakit wala siyang share split? No? Tandaan, class, this transaction takes place in June 30. Yung share split na 241 happens in May 1. So be careful with that. So total weighted average number of shares would be 864,000. Okay? So siguro ang kailangan ng bantayan dito, class, no, in this type of problems would be the dates. No? This is very important kasi baka magkamali ka. So especially in situation like this, no, there's a treasury shares, no, and yet there were also share split, no, in May 1 and in December 31. So be careful with that. Okay, so let's have that's problem number 2. So let's have problem number 3. Problem number 3, what amount should be reported as basic earnings per share for 2021? On January 1, 2021, the entity had the following capital structure. Ordinary share capital, 200,000 shares for 2 million. Preference share capital, 50,000 shares. Ayun na. Non-cumulative. No? In this particular problem, I've highlighted the word non-cumulative. No? It's in bold pa. Para lang at least mas maintindihan ano yung dapat na treatment. Okay, so that's 5 million pesos. On March 1, 2022, the entity issued 25% share dividend on ordinary shares prior to the issuance of financial statements for 2021. No dividend was declared on preference shares during 2021. Ayun na. So very clear, non-cumulative, and there was no declaration of dividend for 2021. So therefore, we have to ignore the preference share dividends. The net income for 2021 was 6 million pesos. So, ang tinatanong dito, class, what amount should be reported as basic earnings per share for 2021? So, let's have problem number 3. So, dyan pa rin siya. Problem number 3, that's 6 million. No? So, we have net income of 6 million. Pansinin lang natin, class, ito, no? The entity issued 25% share dividend on ordinary shares prior to the issuance of financial statement. No? So aside from this, I'll just put this one here. No? Para at least yung application ulit. So, sabi kasi dito, very clear. Again, no, this is the requirement, no, set by the standard IAS 33. So sabi dyan, bonus issue, share split, and share rights are still applicable if such changes occur after the balance sheet date but prior to the date the financial statement are authorized for issue. Hinighlight ko yan kasi sabi dito on March 1, 2022, the entity issued 25% share dividend prior to the issuance of financial statement. If it was issued prior to the issuance of the financial statement, then therefore we have to apply it retrospectively. So paano yun? Compute natin yung weighted average number of shares. So that's 200,000 shares multiplied by 1.25 multiplied by 12 over 12. So that would be 250,000. Ulitin ko class ha. Since the issuance of the share dividend, 25% share dividend happens prior to the issuance of financial statement, meaning prior to the signing and authorization of financial statements, then we have to apply it retrospectively. So now we're ready to calculate for our basic earnings per share. So we have net income over the weighted average number of shares. No? So that's 6 million. Again, no, this is non-cumulative and no dividend was declared. Ang sabi natin, non-cumulative preference share, we can only deduct the preference share dividends from the net income when declared. No? So since there's no declaration, so our system is we're also not going to deduct it from the preference, from the net income. So that's 6 million over the weighted average number of shares outstanding of 250,000. So meron tayong basic earnings per share of 24 pesos. Okay? So tingnan mo muna natin para at least mas ma-appreciate yung information. No? So this is different approach, no, in BEPS. No? So napansin mo, we have applied this concept, no, this requirement of the IAS, and also concept on the preference share dividends relating to non-cumulative preference share capital. Okay, so that's problem number 3. So let's have problem number 4. Problem number 4, what amount should be reported as basic earnings per share for 2021? On January 1, 2021, an entity had the following capital structure. We have ordinary share capital of 3 million, preference share capital cumulative 5 million pesos. In the light of the availability of surplus funds and declining market yield, the entity agreed with the preference shareholders to redeem the preference shares on January 1, 2021 for a total consideration of 6 million. So there's a redemption of preference shares. The net income for 2021 was 5,500,000. Because the preference shares are settled on January 1, 2021, there is no requirement to pay preference dividends for 2021. Ito nga, dapat hindi na ito sinabi. No? Since the redemption, no, sinabi dyan, January 1, 2021, it's cumulative. Kung na-redeem na noong January 1, 2021, therefore, kahit hindi na i-mention to, wala na talagang kailangang bayaran na preference dividends, no, in 2021. What amount should be reported as basic earnings per share? No? So again, there's the concept of redemption of preference share. No? So we have also discussed this concept earlier. So let's apply this. Let's apply those concepts, no, that we have discussed earlier in problem number 4. Sige. So in problem number 4, lagay ko to. At the same time, lagay ko na lang dito ang formula natin ng basic earnings per share. So at least we can see it side by side. Okay. So sabi natin dyan, we have a payment. How much is the payment? 6 million. No? So total consideration of 6 million less the carrying value. Magkano ba yung carrying value ng preference share capital natin? So that would be 5 million pesos. No? So 6 million less 5 million, we have 1 million pesos. So the carrying value of 5 million is less than the redemption price. Redemption price is the total consideration. So that's 6 million. So if the carrying value is less than the redemption price, so now we can say that we have loss on redemption amounting to 1 million pesos. So sabi natin, if there's a loss on redemption, ayan na, if there's a loss on redemption, then there's a change, no, in the calculation of the basic earnings per share. So paano na ngayon yung formula natin? It's net income less the preference share dividends less loss on redemption over the weighted average number of shares outstanding. So pag-usapan ulit natin yung preference share. Sabi natin, the redemption happens in in January 1. No? So if it happens in January 1, so ergo, there's no need to pay preference share dividends for 2021. So tandaan class ha, we're calculating the basic earnings per share for 2021. So with that, let's now derive the formula. So that's 6 million less, sorry, net income is 5,500,000. It's also given. So that's 5,500,000 less the loss on redemption. So that would be 4,500,000 pesos over the weighted average number of shares outstanding. So pansinin nyo class, in this problem, there are no other details, no, as to the movement of your ordinary shares, no. So therefore, that 300,000 pesos 300,000 shares beginning of 2021, that would also represent your weighted average number of shares outstanding for the purpose of calculating your basic earnings per share. So that's 4,500,000 over 300,000. So that would be 15 pesos. Ayun pala, no, the reason why I'm clicking this icon, no, para at least makita natin kung meron mga decimal places. Kasi what I'd like to do is in the examination, let's have at least two decimal places. No? Okay. Okay. So problem number 5. What amount should be reported as basic earnings per share for current year? So dito naman class, an entity had a net income of 15 million for the current year. The following appropriations have not been considered in this amount. Arrears of cumulative preference dividend for 2 years, ordinary dividends, 5 million, preference share premium payable on redemption, 1 million, exceptional gain net of tax, 4 million. The entity had 400,000 ordinary shares of 100 pesos par value outstanding at the beginning of the year. What amount should be reported as basic earnings per share for the current year? Isa-isa natin to class now. So in problem number 5, we're actually testing to analyze. No? We need to analyze yung element naman ng numerator natin. So, meron tayo ito net income. Pero pansinin nyo, sabi dito, ito daw, yung net income natin, itong mga items na to, they are not considered. No? So, arrears of cumulative preference dividend for 2 years. So, again, no, in the case of basic earnings per share, ang kailangan lang naman natin is for 1 year. No? So if this is 2 years divided by 2, so that's 2 million, yun lang yung kailangan natin to calculate for the basic earnings per share. Ordinary dividends, again, the dividends paid to the ordinary shares, wala siyang bearing. No? So sa formula natin, there's no mention about the ordinary dividends. No? So ignore natin yan. Now, ito, preference share premium payable on redemption. This is premium payable on redemption. So meaning there's a redemption of preference shares. No? Pero pag-usapan natin whether this is gain or loss. No? So since you are going to pay premium, so that therefore that the consideration paid is greater than the carrying value. So meron ka ngayong loss of 1 million. Exceptional gain net of tax. No? So with the issuance of latest IFRS, there's no parang these are no longer allowed. No? No longer allowed to include exceptional gain o ito yung mga tinatawag natin exceptional gains or losses, no? So that because these are being abused. So right now we have to include this. Kailangan pa rin natin, no? Kailangan pa rin isama, pero not as a separate line but instead part of your other income. So that would be 4 million. So let's have problem number 5. Isa-isayin natin siya. So problem number 5 is so problem number 5. Sa net income natin, we have 15 million. This is the unadjusted net income. No? Of course, sabi natin kanina, meron dyan exceptional gain net of tax. So sabi natin, cannot be presented separately but should be recognized as other income. Ito na naman yung sinabi ko kanina. So we have to adjust our net income. So add this 4 million. Kasi sabi, di ba, not being considered. No? So hindi pa siya kasama dun sa 15 million. So we have to add this back. So we have to add this. So that's 15 plus 4. So that's 19 million. This would be our adjusted net income. So meron na tayong adjusted net income. Pag-usapan natin yung preference share dividends. Now again, sa preference share dividends natin, meron tayo dyan cumulative preference dividends for 2 years. No? Since kailangan lang natin ulit, no? Lagay ko dito to para at least kita natin yung concept. Okay. Okay. So sabi natin, ang kailangan lang naman natin is yung 1 year. No? So to calculate for your basic earnings per share, we only need the entitled current dividend for the year. No? So that would be 2 million. So, paano nakuha yung 2 million? Kasi there's no mention of other details here. No? Ang may binigay lang is arrears for 2 years. No? So kunin lang natin yung for 1 year. So that would be 2 million pesos. Now, sabi natin kanina dito, no? Preference share premium payable on redemption. So there was a redemption of preference share. But in this case, since you're paying premium, no? So if you're paying for a premium, so meaning the total consideration, the carrying value is less than the redemption price. No? So that would be a loss. No? So sabi natin, to compute for the basic earnings per share, no, with loss of redemption, so we have also to deduct this from your net income. No? So that's how much is the net income? 19 million. The adjusted net income. Net 19 million less 2 million for the preference share dividends, less 1 million for the loss on redemption. So that's 16 million over 400,000. Atong 400,000, this is the ordinary shares. Now, again, there's no mention about any other information on the movement of your ordinary shares. So therefore, the ordinary shares outstanding at the beginning of the year will represent the weighted average number of shares outstanding for the purpose of calculating your basic earnings per share. So that's 400,000. So 16 million over 400,000. So that would be 40 pesos. So that's problem number 5. Punta natin yung problem number 6. So, bear with me class, no? So, napansin nyo, lahat ng concept on basic earnings per share, we're trying to illustrate it, no, by way of different discussion problems. So, that's why I have prepared a number of sample problems for this afternoon. So what amount should be reported as basic earnings per share for the current year? So this is problem number 6. An entity reported net income of 15 million for the current year. The net income reflected an income tax rate of 25%. The net income included a casualty loss before income tax. So, pansinin, included na. The entity showed the following shareholders' equity at year-end. So, we have preference share capital, 10%, cumulative. Ayan, highlight ko na naman. So, it's cumulative, that's 5 million. Ordinary share capital, so 30 million pesos. We have share premium, 10 million, retained earnings, 18 million, treasury shares. No? Again, this is important. That's for 4 million. What amount should be reported as basic earnings per share for current year? So let's have problem number 6. So in problem number 6, lagay ko lang ulit to para at least meron tayong guide. In problem number 6, itong 15 million na to class, this already includes the casualty loss. No? Ngayon, kung halimbawa hindi to sinabi excluded, we have to deduct this. No? We have to adjust our net income. But since this is already part of the 15 million, so wala na tayong kailangan gawin. Now, since the preference share is cumulative, at sabi natin sa formula, if it's a cumulative, we have to deduct from the net income the entitled current year dividend, whether declared or not. So that's 5 million multiplied by 10% or 500,000 pesos. Pag-usapan ngayon natin yung weighted average number of shares outstanding. Pansinin, we have at the beginning of the year, we have 300,000 shares issued. No? And also, we have treasury shares of 50,000. Now, there's no dates given, no? So as to when the treasury shares were purchased. No? So therefore, kunin lang natin yung, it's as if at the beginning of the year. No? So that's 250,000. So that's 300,000 ordinary shares less the treasury shares of 50,000. So that's 250,000. 14,500,000 over 250,000. So that's 58 pesos. So, wag magpapalito siguro dito class na. So in problem number 6, there's this casualty loss, no? Pero tandaan, it's already included, no, in the net income. So we don't have to adjust it. Unlike in problem number 5 kasi, no? Actually problem number here, no? In problem number 5, there's the exceptional gain, no? But in this case, it's not yet included in the 15 million. So yun lang yung naging difference na problem number 6. Right? Sige. Problem number 7. Ito. Problem number 7 deals with a consolidated financial statements. No? So there's also a comparative income statement. So pag-usapan natin yung problem number 7, we have 2 requirements. So number 1, what amount should be reported as basic earnings per share for 2022 in the comparative income statement for 2022? But what amount should be reported as basic earnings per share for 2021 in the comparative income statement for 2022? So tandaan class, the standard requires us to present at least 2 periods, no, in the financial statements. No? So kung for example, you're doing comparative income statement, if it's an income statement, dapat meron ka dyan current year and the immediate prior year. No? So if it's 2022, dapat meron ka dyan 2021. Now, in terms of comparative income statement, no, and the basic earnings per share, we also have to present this. No? So paano yan? Pag-usapan natin itong problem number 7. An entity had 1 class of ordinary share capital outstanding and no other securities that are potentially convertible into ordinary shares. the net income for 2022 was 6 million. And the net income for 2021 was 3,600,000. During 2021, 120,000 shares were outstanding. Okay, tayo doon, no? In 2022, two distributions of additional ordinary shares occurred. April 1, we have 40,000 treasury shares were sold, and in July 1, 2-for-1 share split was issued. Pag-usapan ngayon natin itong 2-for-1 share split. So sabi natin, 2-for-1 share split, we have to apply this retrospectively. So pag-usapan natin itong problem number 7. Problem number 7, class, let's focus first in 2021. So in 2021, sabi natin, we have 120,000 shares outstanding. Kung meron tayong 120,000 shares outstanding, and then there was a 2-for-1 share split that took place in July 1, 2022, and sabi natin, di ba, the application of share split should be retrospective, no? Retrospective, but in this case kasi, we are preparing comparative income statement, no? So in order for the basic earnings per share to be comparable, so we also have to apply it for 2021, no? So that's 120,000 multiplied by 2 for share split, multiplied by 12 over 12. So that would be 240,000. Kaya sagit nga lang, lalabas ko lang ito sa wait lang. Okay, sorry about that. So, going back to problem number 7, sabi natin kasi dito, di ba, there was a share split in July 1, 2022, no? And we have to apply this retrospectively. So, meaning, we have to also include it in the 2021 comparative income statement for 2022, no? So, we have also net income of 3,600,000 over 240,000. So that would be 15. So 15 pesos for 2021. So the answer is letter B. Ngayon, pag-usapan natin yung 2022. So this part, no? So for this part, we have 120,000 beginning of the year. So that's 2 over 12 over 12. No? That's 240,000. Ngayon, nagkaroon ng treasury shares of 40,000. No? So for treasury shares were sold. So in this case, this is the reissuance. No? So meaning, if this is the reissuance, so we have to add this back, no, in your outstanding shares. So that's 40,000 multiplied by 2 over 9 over 12. Pag-usapan quickly natin to, baka kasi may confusion, no? So tandaan dito, we are not acquiring the treasury shares. We are selling it. So it's as if we are reissuing the shares, no? So if we reissue the treasury shares, tandaan, this will form part of your outstanding shares once again. Okay, so that would be 60,000. So compute natin yan. So total outstanding shares, so weighted average number of shares outstanding would be 300,000 pesos. 300,000 shares. So meron ka 6 million na net income. Net income from 2022. Net income for 2022 is 6 million. So that's 6 million over 300,000. So that would be 20 pesos for 2022. So pansinin ulit class ha, kasi possible that in 2021, when you computed for your basic earnings per share, iba yung lalabas. No? But since you are preparing for 2022, and sabi natin, the standard requires us to at least present, no? At least present two periods, no? At least, so that the financial statement can satisfy, no, one of the uh, important characteristics, no, yung comparability, no. So syempre, if you want to achieve that, you have to present these two period financial statements, no. So in this case, the 2021, we have to reflect the change, no, brought about by the share split, no. Kasi sabi nga natin kanina, share split, it's as if it happens, no, in the beginning. So therefore, we have to recalculate this. We have to recalculate our basic earnings per share for 2021. Okay, so that's problem number 7. Pag-usapan natin yung problem number 8. Problem number 8, the what amount should be reported as basic earnings per share for 2021? On January 1, 2021, an entity had 300,000 ordinary shares outstanding, 100 par or total par value of 30 million. During 2021, the entity issued rights to acquire one ordinary share at 100 pesos in the ratio of 1 share for every 5 shares held. So itong 100 pesos class dito, this is the subscription price, or this is also the exercise price or the option price. No? So wag magpapalito dyan class. Ha? Those three terms, they are being used, no, interchangeably, pero they're of the same, sabihin natin, they're of the same definition. So this 100 pesos here, this is the subscription price, the exercise price, or the option price. So magpapalit dyan. The rights are exercised on March 31, 2021. So yun na, there's the exercise of the rights. So the market value of each ordinary share immediately prior to March 31, 2021 was 160 pesos. So the net income for 2021 was 6 million. What amount should be reported as basic earnings per share for 2021? So ito medyo mahaba yung mga formula. No? So pag-usapan natin yung problem number 8. So problem number 8, lagay ko lang dito. Dito. Sige, side by side. So basically, una muna natin, ayan, meron tayong subscription price of 100. Fair value of the rights on, nakalagay naman dyan, market value of each ordinary share immediately prior to March 31 was 160. So that's the fair value rights on. Number of additional shares, additional ordinary shares, so that's 300,000 over 5. Paano natin nakuha yung 300,000 over 5? Pag-usapan natin quickly. Yung 5, sabi kasi dyan class, it's the rights, no? Sabi, the entity issued rights to acquire one ordinary share for every 5 shares held. So, therefore, kung meron kang 300,000 ordinary shares, you are given 1 share for every 5. No? So, 300,000 divided by 5. So, that's total of 60,000 shares. 60,000 additional shares. Ngayon, of course, we have to compute for the adjustment factor, no? Kasi meron nga element of share rights dito, no? Compute natin para this. Okay. This one, this one. This is applicable to share rights. Alright. Okay. So, of course, no, if this is share rights, sabi natin, this should be apply retrospectively. should be applied retrospectively. So this is the adjustment factor. No? So how to compute that? That's fair value of the share rights on over the theoretical value of the X rights. How to compute for the fair value of share rights on? So it's the fair value of the shares immediately prior to the exercise of the rights. No? So therefore, this is the 160 here. Okay? Now, paano ngayon natin kukomputin yung theoretical value of the X rights? No? So to compute that, we have the fair value share rights on here. So that's 160, that's given. Less the theoretical value rights on. Theoretical value rights on, paano naman mako-compute? Ayun, meron din tayong separate formula. Fair value share rights on less subscription price. Magkano nga yung fair value share rights on natin? 160. 160, magkano yung subscription price? 100 pesos. No? So that's 60 over 6. No? Number of rights for one share is 5 plus 1. So that's 6. No? So we have 10. Now, 160 minus 10, so that would be 150. O yan, nakakompleto na. Meron tayong theoretical value X rights. No? So, meron tayong dalawang factor. Computin na natin yung adjustment factor. Actually, the adjustment factor is 160 over 150. Okay? So, sabi natin, we have to apply it the beginning of the year. No? So, we have 300,000 multiplied by 160 over 150 multiplied by 3 over 12. So, that's 80,000. Now, come March 31, meron tayong 300,000 nung January. Meron ng additional, no? Dahil dun sa in-exercise na share rights. So, plus 60,000. 360,000 multiplied by 9 over 12. Kasi March 31, wag magpapalito, no? March 31 to, kaya naging 9 over 12 pa rin. So, that's 270,000. So, get the sum. So, that's 350,000 pesos. Okay? Now, we're ready to compute for our basic earnings per share. So, we have net income of 6 million over the weighted average number of shares of 350,000. So, the answer is 17.14. So, ito class, no? Pansinin, ang dami mga formula involved, no? So, we have to practice solving this type of problem so that will become more familiar, no, in this formula. So again, the formula are all provided in this slide. So all you have to do is try to practice. No? So I suggest try to solve this problem yourselves, or look for another type of problem of the same type, no? So that so you can apply this formula. No? So that's problem number 8. Problem number 8. Actually, that ends our discussion on basic earnings per share. Again, if you have any questions, you can send me a message on my personal email address, or you can course it through your class PDL.
This has been your instructor, Mark Gibson. Thank you for learning with us. See you in our next discussion. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya!